and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
Today I'll be filming my reaction to the 2025 college football playoff quarterfinals. So it feels great to be an Ole Miss fan right now because they just got their biggest win probably ever, and at least since I've been watching college football, and I've been watching college football for close to 15 years. Over the soft Georgia puppy dogs. And I bet it does not feel very good to be Lane Kiffin right now because he went to LSU thinking that he couldn't beat teams like this at Ole Miss. Ole Miss, their defensive line pushed around the Georgia offensive line for most of the game, and Georgia's offensive line had a big size advantage over their defensive line. They held Georgia to just 124 rushing yards and 3.4 yards per run. Ole Miss, their defense was so much better this time than it was in the first meeting with Georgia. And Georgia only got 27 points offensively. And if it hadn't have been for mistakes, Ole Miss would have won this game easier because that fumble by Ole Miss, Georgia didn't force it. Lacey just dropped the ball, and the Georgia player, Dalen Everett, picked it up and ran it back. And after that Georgia defensive touchdown, I thought the game was pretty much over. It was very impressive the way Ole Miss was able to come back because your chances of coming back on Georgia from 2 scores behind, no matter who you are, is almost none. And then Daquan Wright messed up at the end of the first half because Ole Miss was in range for their kicker, Lucas Carnero, who's one of the best, if not the best kicker in college football. And instead of going out of bounds, Wright tried to get the first down, and because they didn't have a timeout left, they weren't able to get their kicker out there in time. And then there was another time during the game where Wright dropped what would have been a first down catch to keep the drive going. And Daquan Wright almost never drops a pass. He's Ole Miss's most reliable pass catcher. But had Ole Miss been able to kick that field goal at the end of the first half, they wouldn't have needed to have kicked that game-winning field goal. And then on the 4th and 1, Lacey, had he ran to the side, he not only would have gotten the first down, he would have gotten at least 5 yards, but because he ran to the middle, he didn't get the first down. And you cannot run up the middle on Georgia. That's their best part of their defense. And Georgia's defense proved me wrong. I thought they had actually gotten better since the first meeting with Ole Miss, but they were even worse this time. They had just played a bunch of crappy offenses. Georgia's garbage secondary got picked apart by the actual best quarterback in college football, Trinidad Chambliss. And if Ole Miss goes on to win the national championship, I'm going to say that Trinidad Chambliss is the best college quarterback to ever touch a football. He threw for 362 yards in this game. And
एवर ने उस पर दबाव बनाया। एवर ने फिर से कोने से हमला किया। चैम्बर्स अपनी ही गोल लाइन के पास पीछे हट रहा है। एक ब्लॉक उठाता है। यहाँ फिर से जाते हैं। लेसी ने कैच लिया।
Well, Ole Miss didn't run for a lot of yards only 111. It's not because they couldn't. Kaiwan Lacey ran for 98 yards and two touchdowns and averaged 4.5 yards per carry. When he ran to the side, Georgia couldn't stop him. Ole Miss didn't need to run a lot because it's like Georgia's secondary wasn't even there, and Georgia's wide receivers are trash except for Zachariah Branch, and you could tell that Pete Golding had a plan to not let those garbage Georgia tight ends embarrass them again. Those two tight ends that Delvin Lucky combined for a pitiful two catches for 36 yards. And that Georgia pass rush that was supposedly a lot better had zero sacks in this game. And then Georgia also got away with a face mask. And Kirby Smart, who is considered to be the best coach in college football, got out coached by Pete Golding, who's in his was in his second game ever as a head coach. Smart made the stupid decision to go for it on 4th and 2 at his own 33, and then Stockton got sacked by Centurion Perkins, and I really like to see that because Centurion Perkins last year was an elite pass rusher and ranked second in the SEC in sacks, but his sack numbers have been way down this year, and he hasn't been able to get after the quarterback near as much. But something that's too bad for Kirby Smart is that Pete Golding has already decided to call the plays on defense himself next year. So otherwise, he could have been Pete Golding's defensive coordinator. And it used to be that Alabama was the place to go for coaches like him that have gotten on the wrong track because Nick Saban was there, but Smart wouldn't want to go to Alabama and work for that clown, Kalen DeBoer, although maybe he should because he lost to him twice in the last 2 years. That is really embarrassing. And Georgia was supposed to have replaced Alabama as the new top program in college football. And while Alabama certainly isn't the top program in college football anymore after what happened yesterday, I don't think it's Georgia that's replaced them. Looks like it might be Ole Miss because they've had a better team than Georgia both of the last 2 years now, or Indiana because Kirk Cincinnati seems a lot like Nick Saban. You can tell that he's an all business coach. When DeBoer is not going to last at Alabama, because while if you look at his record since he's been at Alabama, for most teams he would be in no danger of getting fired, but he's not meeting the expectations that have been created at Alabama. Kirk Cincinnati was coaching circles around him, and this Rose Bowl was Alabama's worst loss since before Nick Saban came there. And but Nick Saban only had one blowout loss in his 17 years there, but DeBoer already has three in 2 years, and he had two blowout losses this year. He doesn't make adjustments during the game like Nick Saban did when things aren't working. With him, it's like we're sticking to our game plan for the whole game, and if we lose, that's fine. But coming into this game, Alabama was planning on blitzing a lot more than they usually do, and you could tell at the beginning that Indiana was surprised by it, but then after the first possession, when they were expecting it. Indiana's offensive line pushed them around and they ran for 215 yards. They ran so well that Mendoza didn't even need to throw the ball much. He only threw 16 times, but when he did, Alabama couldn't stop that either. Mendoza completed 14 of those throws and averaged 12 yards per throw and threw three touchdown passes. And while Ty Simpson got hurt, that wasn't going to matter. The backup quarterback had even more success than he did in this one. Indiana looks like the best team in the country, but I would not be surprised if any of these four teams win the whole thing. DeBoer's made Alabama soft, and I know you probably want to blame offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb for the offense, but the offensive coordinator doesn't coach the offensive line. And the 2 years that he was at Washington calling plays, when they had a great offensive line, they put up a whole bunch of points. But Indiana's defensive line pushed around Alabama, like nearly every defensive line they've played has, holding them to just 23 yards rushing and 1.4 yards per run. I still don't get though why the Alabama coaching staff didn't realize that after as many games as they played that they can't run the football because Grubb kept calling runs. A lot, even when they kept failing. But the Oregon defense played their best game of the season for sure, and probably their best game since Lanning has been there. I did not think there was any chance that they could shut out Texas Tech as many points as Texas Tech has put up this season, but Texas Tech was held to just 215 yards of offense, and but there was only two drives where they were even able to move the ball. And Texas Tech's defense did everything they could to keep them in this game. And their defensive line did pass their biggest test of the season. They pushed around the Oregon offensive line. Oregon wasn't able to run any better than anyone else has been able to on Texas Tech. Just had 64 yards rushing and averaged a pitiful 1.4 yards per run. But while Oregon's offense was terrible too in this game, the difference was they were able to throw well. Dante Moore had a pretty good game at throwing for 234 and completing a really good 78.8% of his passes. Texas Tech's offense, I guess, got exposed because, well, they had faced some good defenses, Utah and then BYU twice. Turns out those defenses aren't near as good as Oregon's is. And Bayron Morton got exposed as a fraud. He looked like a high school quarterback trying to play college football. And while Lanning did two times make a dumb decision on 4th and 2, he should have just taken the points. You could tell that while Oregon and Texas Tech both had elite rosters, Oregon just had a much better coaching staff than Texas Tech did. Same old soft Ohio State team is back. Finally beating Michigan again was their national championship. And with Michigan bringing in Whittingham, I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State doesn't beat them for another 5 years, with Whittingham being such a line of scrimmage expert. But while this Ohio State defense was really good, it became clear in this game that they're not 2021 Georgia or 2011 Alabama good. Miami's defensive line pushed around this Ohio State offensive line to the point that they looked like an offensive line from a group of five team. Ohio State's offensive line gave up 5 sacks, and they could not handle Akeem Messidor or Ruben Bain. Those two combined for 3.5 of those sacks, and they ran for a pitiful 45 yards and 1.9 yards per run. And while statistically, like against Texas A&M, Carson Beck got outplayed. Sayan had nearly 150 more yards passing than Beck did. The difference was Miami's offensive line played really well. They ran for 153 yards and averaged 4.1 yards per run, which is the most that anyone's gotten on Ohio State. And while Ohio State, like Texas A&M, shut down Malachi Tony, holding him to just 5 catches for 16 yards. Miami's other two wide receivers, Daniels and Marion, made more plays than they did against Texas A&M. And Mark Fletcher had another good game, running for 90 yards on 19 uh, carries. Ohio State's offense really got exposed in this one because it turns out they're only good against crappy defenses like Purdue and Rutgers, but then when they go against a really good defense, they can't score hardly anything. But that'll be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.